Welcome, welcome one, welcome all. We're here live on BerryFlow Upstream number 109. Here with our regulars, we got Blaze, editor-in-chief over at crackberry.com. How you doing, Blaze?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
Hanging in. We're here another week, right? Hopefully next week is more exciting than last. Although, in the BlackBerry world, we had some things to talk about. Blaze, we're going to be talking today as well with Alex Bass of Cyberbytes Inc. How are you doing, sir?
Can't complain. No, I'm good.
You can complain. I hear you complain often, in fact.
This is true. This is true.
We try to keep it off air, just for that matter. Uh, Interesting week, guys, right? As we transition here from kind of a very, very dull last week, there's a lot more that's going on in terms of BlackBerry security. We had this BlackBerry Security Summit last Tuesday over in New York City. Really a big event for BlackBerry, probably their biggest, if not only, event that they're really doing these days. And it seems that they were pretty focused on the New York area specifically as part of this event. A lot of news went down. Blaze, what were some of your favorite kind of headlines that you got to post out, maybe just in terms of the press releases and stuff? I mean, there was stuff from data cards to, different integrations that they've done with partners over to U.S. Senate news. I mean, what were some of the highlights that, you guys were posting about this week on Crackberry?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest stuff that at least that really caught my eye. They basically announced a partnership with the U.S. Senate, where the U.S. Senate will use AtHoc software for the crisis communications on Capitol Hill. The U.S. Department of Defense gave them another approval for using the devices, BlackBerry 10.3.2 OS devices on the Department of the Defense network. And the U.S. Coast Guard basically extended their capabilities with using AtHoc. So those were pretty much the highlights for me. And I mean, I think basically the biggest one there, it almost kind of felt like BlackBerry was kind of like sending a message with the U.S. Senate announcement, because of the fact that we heard that was basically how the BlackBerry Classic and that discontinuation announcement sort of came out, was through the U.S. Senate. So it was kind of like, yeah, that happened. We're not going to ignore it, but we're also still continuing to go ahead and work with the U.S. Senate. So I think that was one of the key things. And, a lot of the market watchers, I guess you could say, paid attention to that, because it was a lot of government contracts and a lot of government bills at that point that have to be paid off to BlackBerry. So I think, the majority of people paid attention to that. There were some other announcements as well. Basically, Symphony's secure collaboration service is now compatible with Good Dynamics. A few other minor announcements.
One of the things that I think you mentioned is a really kind of stark reminder for people out there in terms of what BlackBerry is going through right now. So just as the Senate, is talking about discontinuing the use of the classic devices, we get news that in turn they're buying BlackBerry software instead, and that is a story John Chen and basically all of BlackBerry were talking about at the Security Summit. It's that we're moving from handsets to software in an important way, right? An important way for us and our customers. And I think that's one of the most kind of underlying tones of the entire event. It's that BlackBerry is making this transition and making it work for them. Alex, in terms of, I know you're not necessarily tapped right into the vein of all this stuff these days. Was there anything particular that this week popped out to you, maybe a little bit unexpected or even a little bit, more interesting than the norm that we get from BlackBerry with all these different security, type announcements?
I mean, I'm one of the people that probably relates to a lot of people watching that the only thing that I found most interesting was Chen was like, hey, we'll talk about the new devices next week. Just let us focus on security today, because that's what that's what this event is for. That was kind of the bit that I was like, okay, so I don't need to watch any of this. No, I'm just kidding. I watched some of it.
Show me the devices. That's all I want to know about. Please get to it.
It's interesting timing as well for some of their partners, right? Because we know this next device that's coming, next week, is very likely going to be handed around to some of their key partners at events like these. Partners that they're really close with, and they want to show, hey, what's coming next? It's like, yeah, on the low, here's what we're actually doing and building, and this is, part of our roadmap to come. And you got to imagine BlackBerry does have a more kind of drawn out roadmap, but it's one they're using more directly with their partners as opposed to kind of putting out there for their consumers, because as we know, the consumer base is really, really different than how it was, maybe 3 years ago. Something that caught my eye here was QNX getting chosen for electric locomotives. I thought that was pretty cool. Another capability that BlackBerry has to tap into in terms of the market, an industrial version of the QNX operating system. I just want to see more of these kinds of endpoints for BlackBerry. I feel like they're good places for BlackBerry to be able to grow in the future. But I can imagine as well that something like this, a win like this with QNX is probably less monetarily beneficial than like something like their AtHoc or just a direct kind of B2B type software, right? I think of like Bez versus like them selling or licensing QNX. They're going to make way more on the Bez sale versus kind of licensing. So in terms of QNX and what it really has to do with my kind of overall BlackBerry story right now, where do you think they can actually monetize it? I mean, right now I'm seeing just not really many venues that they can go into. I'm sure there are a lot more silent kind of customer wins on the QNX side, as they're kind of a wraith in the industry. But like for instance, I saw some Kia cars get updated, and now they have the capability of dabbling with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay and things like that. Do you think really that QNX has a lot to put toward the balance sheet these days, and are we going to start seeing more kind of people take up use of QNX?
I mean, I think they'll find ways to use it. It's, and from what it seems like, it's very robust, and it could work on a bunch of things at a core level, especially when we start getting into like autonomous driving and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's at a core level at some systems, and I think we'll see. I mean, but that's one of the things too, where it's probably going to be more quiet with a lot of things that it is. If it's just kind of sitting in a system somewhere as at a very like low level, you probably won't even hear much of it anyway. So I think it's kind of tough to look around and see exactly what QNX is going to do, what's it directly going to affect the balance sheet and things like that. I think it'll be around like it has been, but.
And I wonder, is it because we know Chen has spoken specifically on how this works in the in the automotive space that you just mentioned, Alex. Like right now, they're making royalty fees on the kind of the software that they're licensing to manufacturers and tier one suppliers who then put their systems inside of cars. So it's maybe not even like a direct connection with some of these automotive OEMs, but they are featured, at the base as in core, as you mentioned. So if it is a royalty base, I wonder if that applies to their other industry verticals as well, like the industrial stuff that they're doing, or the stuff they're doing for power plants and things like that, versus also the market of healthcare, right, and their medical devices. I wonder, is that all kind of royalty based, or what, or they have different kinds of breakdowns? Because if so, there's really QNX will make money kind of years off in the future then if that's the case, because there's really not that many peripherals right now that need this kind of faultless system, that real-time structure. A lot of the press release just talks about the QNX tool and the overall architecture just to be safe by design, and that's really all they were looking for. Something scalable that would be secure for what they were doing. So kind of
something they don't have to reboot every 10 minutes.
Right. Especially, because this is like electric as well, it's kind of going more green. You kind of want to automate as much as possible and have a seamless system so that, of course, the data emissions are going to be less for you on a well-managed system. The photo that's posted is just one of those little kind of rail cars that's attached to, electrical cable atop. So pretty cool stuff. I wish more stuff like this was told. If it is happening more in the background, I'd love to hear more about it. I feel like, part on the press side of that piece, they need to continue showing that QNX is being adopted in different places. You kind of wonder what the overlying strategy is going to be long term for them, 10 years out, 20 years out, with the assets that they have. We've seen a lot of companies, like Intel specifically, trying to move into this IoT pivot and just not getting the kind of revenue return that they want. How do you feel about that, Alex? In terms of BlackBerry pivoting towards software, do you really think they can have like a long-lasting foot to grow kind of their secure communication platform? I mean, we saw a lot of talk of this growth happening right now in terms of this BlackBerry Security Summit. But do you really think kind of as an end user that you'd ever find yourself needing or going towards some BlackBerry software again? I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of wins for emergency crisis communications, but we haven't heard anything about BBM, right? Something that has a lot more capabilities than for what we know of AtHoc. Really different
Yeah.
systems, but what are some of your thoughts on the correlations?
I mean, as a user at this point, just seeing the way that things have been working out and seeing how my friends, like a lot of them, are trying to leave, say, Android, BlackBerry to just get iMessage. I'm trying to be realistic to an extent that there really aren't many more people installing BBM. So either BlackBerry really has to figure something out with that, and I don't know what that is, or if it could even possibly bring anyone over to it. So something, for instance, like SMS integration that was kind of added to Facebook Messenger, and there's actually a lot of people that have switched over to Facebook Messenger as their main client. So if they did something like that, that would be great. So I feel like there are things they could do to help the consumer market to get them on board for BBM, but other than that, like when I think of communication, BlackBerry, secure, for the other than BBM, I don't know what is there from a consumer standpoint that we can actually physically like touch, use, feel.
These devices. Oh wait.
Well,
Yeah. It's a really interesting story that they're telling, and I think one of the points John Chen. It just seems like the overall tone of the event for me was very kind of like, we're tired, guys. And I don't mean that in kind of like, we don't want to continue doing this, but I feel like they're like, we've been beating a dead horse here with this message, trying to get you all to understand, you the media, and abroad our customers, to understand this transition that we're making, and that the transition will be beneficial for everyone, right? We're way more open than we were 4 or 5 years ago, and we're a company that now is stable in terms of some of the revenue sheets we've seen. I think the software sales portion, with them kind of being a little bit shaky on that side, they really need to continue pushing on that avenue and working with their partners. I saw one of the news pieces here, BlackBerry and AppDome team up to enable codeless integration of apps for the Good Dynamic platform. I thought that was another interesting kind of partnership, one of those seamless things that just helps bring people into the fray of what BlackBerry is doing. And we know that the Good Dynamics platform has their own application suite and things like that. So some cool stuff going on there as well. What was one of the special guests that we had? I mean, we saw a lot of different partners that BlackBerry had at the event. I know one of Crackberry's editors tweeted out, I'm at a BlackBerry event, and I got a Samsung water bottle and a Microsoft bag, and I thought that was really cool to show that again their biggest partners are also some of the biggest people in the industry, in terms of what they're doing. In terms of that, Blaze, who else did we have really at the Security Summit? I know there was a special guest that came on at some point, and prior to the event really kicking off, there was a little bit of pause because they were waiting for this person to show up.
Yeah, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani did his speech and basically started off apologizing because he was doing so much yelling previously because he was where was he at? The Republican, I don't even know what they call it, the Republican National Convention. So a little bit of politics mixed in with the BlackBerry Security Summit just to keep things a little interesting there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, politics aside, his Rudy Giuliani's story was actually interesting because he recalled moments from 9/11 when he was basically mayor of New York City at that time. And, as BlackBerry has used recently in one of their videos, 9/11 was a big time for them, where basically all the services stopped working, but BBM was still able to go ahead and keep people connected during that time, even when the phone call systems were crashing and everything else. So it was great to hear that sort of thing, but at the same time, I feel like that's playing off a little bit of too much nostalgia for probably what it's worth these days, because, I mean, that was 9/11.
I don't know. The whole world is playing on nostalgia right now.
Well, it's true. It's true, and you're absolutely right, and these things are important, and, having connectivity in a time of crisis like that is important, but that also, I think that they're sort of using that situation to not in the right way, like
to
They
catalyze. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, like they have AtHoc now, and AtHoc is basically one of the systems that they can go ahead and use in a time of crisis. Like the 9/11 stuff that they refer to, it's great. It worked during that period of time, but they're not even using that system anymore. You know what I mean? Because that was basically a pin-to-pin based system through Biz at that point. And what Android device runs off of Biz? None, right? Like Biz isn't even used really in BlackBerry 10. So you're recalling a system that technically doesn't even
Matter anymore, you know?
yeah, like you got rid of that system and it's no longer a focus. So why not, take that opportunity to go ahead and sort of commingle the two? Because yeah, like I said, the 9/11 crisis was important and it was great that BlackBerry worked at that point in time, but during those same breaths, you should also be mentioning the time of crisis situations that are applicable to AtHoc as well. Sell your services, you know what I mean? And it just doesn't seem like they were doing that. Maybe that's a long-term thing, and we still have to wait and see that play out. But it just seems like a little bit of too much playing on nostalgia there, without actually reinforcing the message that you have, a crisis communication system called AtHoc.
Yeah, Rudy Giuliani was a very interesting choice.
Yeah.
I still can't quite get my head around it. He seemed to know, an ample amount about security, and obviously with his consultancy prior and post, what he did for the city of New York, I found it an interesting, very, again, pointed choice. As we opened the podcast, I said, BlackBerry was very, very focused on New York City, and I think that was one of the reasons being that they have a lot of their customers right there in New York City as well. So it is an interesting foothold for them, an interesting event for them to do on a yearly basis. Now, was this the third? This is the third year that they've done that event. Is that correct?
I keep saying that, but I'm almost sure it was like the fourth, but who knows? I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
exactly one for keeping track of memories.
We can do a Google search and validate that later, right?
Yeah.
I find it's really interesting that BlackBerry has gone ahead and addressed the media in a direct way, and I find that control to be rather smart at this point in the game, because they really need to stop letting that side of the house just totally kind of contort the messaging around what they're trying to do. I wish that they did a little bit more advertising in terms of like putting stuff out there, on Hulu advertisements or on YouTube, and spending a little bit more on getting a little bit fresher a message out. Because for them to play on nostalgia on any level, they need to actually, get in the game. And it doesn't seem that right now they're in any place to kind of take cash of what they've done in the past. Uh, AtHoc and all things considered, those things aren't necessarily as sexy as we want them to be. If you have any kinds of assets that are going to be in people's hands, be it BBM, be it a device, if you could weave your messaging through that kind of tangible asset, it's going to be a lot easier for people to grasp onto to what you're selling. And I really hope that BlackBerry can kind of get around that here with cheaper devices coming. I hope they have now more money to spend on advertising, or with working through different partners and whatnot, that they can actually bring something about that works well. So let's talk about this TCL built device that ran through the FCC. I found this to be kind of just an odd piece of news. I'm interested in this marketing name of the DTEK 50, and I kind of like just pray and hope that's not a launch name or anything like that, and it's just some internal kind of. Well, I would hope so, right? And we've seen DTEK 50 for a while now. This isn't the first time that we've seen any kind of naming mechanism. Is that it's probably a name just typed in to convey, a model type or a number.
Yeah, I mean, every time that something goes through the FCC, it usually doesn't end up as being what it's going to be released as anyways, even if it does say something as important as, like, the marketing name. I don't know. I've seen stuff that both says DTEK 50. I've seen stuff that says Neon, so it's debatable what it's actually going to essentially arrive as in terms of the marketing material. But I think at this point, we're pretty much in a wait and see position to basically go ahead and find out what this device really truly looks like how much how much BlackBerry love did they give it, and what the OS is essentially going to look like. Are we going to be basically looking at like the exact same software as Priv? Is there going to be, some sort of batch updates that come along with it? Because where it is a new device, there has to be like some sort of updates that go along with it, or is it just going to be like the exact same apps that are already loaded on people's Privs now? I don't know. It's interesting time, and I don't know. I just really hope that they don't come to market with DTEK 50, because that would just be stupid.
Yeah.
That would be like a transgression against time and nature. No, but I wonder, like, what would you name this device? Like, throw a name out there for a mid-range, probably too expensive BlackBerry all-touch device running the exact same software that Priv is running. Like, what would you name it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even actually think about that. Like, because it's been referred to so many names at this point that I kind of lost track of what it even actually is. But I don't know.
It's an Alcatel idle.
Yeah, like I don't even know because it's not inspirational. Like, you know what I mean? There's nothing.
Right.
There's nothing
Priv at
purely
least has,
BlackBerry.
like a mechanism to it. Like, it's
Yeah,
kind of
like
niftier.
there's nothing purely BlackBerry about it to be able to say, yeah, like I don't know, maybe DTEK 50 is probably the closest thing to like actually being relative to BlackBerry, because DTEK is the BlackBerry app, so it conveys security. I mean, that's the closest thing. Sadly, I can't think of anything else to name it.
That's if that's the point we've come to, I think this podcast just needs to call it a close. Yeah,
That's it.
we're gonna
for joining. We're out.
Yeah, if BlackBerry launches a DTEK 50, we're out of here. Alex, what would you name a device like this? The Neon, the Hamburg, a mid-range all-touch built by TCL.
I don't know. I feel like it doesn't even really matter too much what the name is. Like, you look at devices like, I don't know, the Galaxy line. They're just like the S6, the S7, the S7 Edge. Like, they don't really mean anything. And unless they're going to really throw out there and advertise it. But I mean, BlackBerry is the kind of company that has always kind of put a name to the device, and so I wouldn't be surprised at all if they do that. That's
sort of my qualm with it, is that like with every BlackBerry device, there has been essentially
unique.
Yeah, there's been something unique about it. There's been essentially a story to go along with it. There's been a background for it, and what's the background on this one? Like, you can't even say that it has any background. There's nothing uniquely BlackBerry about it. It's like, here's a mid-range device.
Yeah.
Go buy it. And
I mean, the Leap had some messaging,
right?
But that, again, didn't have really any kind of backbone really to stand on. I would call this like, something. They need something that is just like SEO catch, like something that is unique enough that when people look for it, they're gonna find it as opposed to something else, Like if they did the BlackBerry, Blade, like of course their product would probably not come up. Something else would come up,
If they're only going to play off of SEO, then basically they should just leave it at Neon and then let it put it out as that, because that already has enough SEO.
Neon phone. I'm searching Google right now.
It's BlackBerry Neon.
That would be just a ridiculous. If we got the Neon, Argon, and Mercury, I would literally.
It doesn't go along with. I feel like BlackBerry, the way that they want to try and differentiate on Android is privacy. So I feel like they want in some way, like the Priv, like privacy, privilege. Like I feel like they want to continue some way doing things like that.
Please don't do that. That would
people know the DTEK name so well now because of the app. People use it on a daily basis. So it might be smart just to keep the DTEK 50.
How do you keep a straight face for that, Alex? What? DTEK 50?
I can't agree with you there, Alex.
It was a joke. That was a joke.
I'm at a loss at this point. In terms of this, this is one of those kind of odd pieces, right? We've known for a while that it's going to be this rebranded type device, but is it truly rebranded? I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, BlackBerry has gone to Foxconn and other players and said, "Hey, build me a phone," and they've done it, right? So this TCL deal, I don't really want people to consider it as a rebranding, right? It's not really a rebranded phone. It has
Yeah.
BlackBerry secure chip. It has BlackBerry software built, contiguously throughout. I mean, it's really a BlackBerry handset, right? And yes, it has all the components and pieces of another device, but to say it's just that device redone is not necessarily accurate. Even there could be even performance differences between something like, an Idol 4 versus, this BlackBerry Neon or Hamburg type device.
Well,
It's
that's the thing. I mean, basically, BlackBerry could still essentially, well, maybe not at this point, but I'm just saying, like in general, like TCL is basically an ODM. They could have changed anything within that device at any given point and still keep the outer shell. Like, you know what I mean? You can put whatever you want in there. It's basically just the shell that's being used
Mhm.
from TCL. It's basically their design. So BlackBerry could be free to go ahead and switch up any of the specs. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing. Um, but it's probably too late for that at this point. But that's how it could have played out. And also, I kind of like with the FCC filing. I kind of don't really understand because as you rightly pointed out, James, like you know, BlackBerry has gone to Foxconn before. They've gone to Wistron before. And they've essentially manufactured their own devices previously. So why is it that when this one rolled through the FCC, they specifically had to go ahead and state that TCL was the manufacturer of the device? It just seems a little bit weird to me in that terms. Like, when let's just say the Classic, when the Classic went through, I don't think it had to be registered as like a Foxconn device when it passed through the FCC. I may be mistaken, but I don't ever recall seeing that call out directly in any of the documents, right?
Yeah, any of the devices, Leap, Classic, none of those were really purported as, that manufacturer's
Yeah.
device, even though, of course, it was made by not BlackBerry. So I find it, as you said, interesting that now we're getting like, these kind of this TCL fronting, and I think that's part of maybe what they really need to tell us, right? Because they should just launch this device, like put it out, right? But no, I feel they have to tell us something to explain that a little bit of that backstory, and I honestly feel that will be kind of a greater understanding of what this deal entails and really who's coming out at what. If TCL is manufacturing it, it's almost as if TCL is the one putting it to market, right? As
Yeah.
a BlackBerry branded phone. So is it more of a licensing play where it's all TCL hardware, TCL effort to get the device forward,
Yeah.
but it has all the BlackBerry architecture and
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 technically speaking, that could help BlackBerry with their message of, reinforce their message of, look, we're basically working towards software. Here is what we're doing on the hardware side. It basically reinforces that message. If they tell that story, you know what I mean? I don't know if they're actually going to tell that story. We'll find out later on this week.
I find it just kind of an odd place for BlackBerry to be at right now. I know I sent you a tweet out the other day, Blaze, and it was like, you know, it looks like an Alcatel 804. No, it's this device. No, it's this device. In terms of, Alcatel as an ODM putting this device out in multiple ways already. And you got to keep that in mind here that if you take a look at what Alcatel has done with this Idol 4 brand is they introduced it at Mobile World Congress, right? They got partners excited about it. And now as an ODM player, they're looking to take what they've built and make money out of it, right? And put it in different markets. So Vodafone has a Smart Platinum 7 device that they've put to market this year, and it is basically a rebranded, kind of redone type of Alcatel Idol 4S. So to
I
say,
really like what they actually did with that, actually.
I do too. It has like a nice kind of carbon fiber change to the back, and it looks fine. It's priced
Yeah.
well, and it includes a VR headset and all that stuff. So cool, Vodafone, that works for you. Awesome. We know BlackBerry's been doing a lot on the, in the UK already, so maybe they were able to see that kind of partnership happen and something like that go down, and they're like, it's an interesting play for us. Maybe we can do something similar. Alex, do you think licensing Android, BlackBerry's version of Android and BlackBerry's apps could be a venue for them to kind of make money in the hardware business without, going all the way into the hardware business? It's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out now, as opposed to being kind of 2 feet in on the hardware piece of their equation.
I kind of thought no for a while, and I don't necessarily stand back from that, but you guys brought up some good points that there are some manufacturers from other countries that they kind of want to get into the U.S. market, and it's probably easier to have some unique value proposition, which BlackBerry can help with their software and services with that. So I do like that mindset, but realistically, I mean, the hardware, like mobile phones hardware division, that is just dying, like as a way to make money. The margins are being cut down to absolutely nothing on Android devices. And as it goes on, like realistically, it's not a market for anyone to make money in. So let's think of like, even if BlackBerry did license out their software, how much would these hardware manufacturers be willing to even pay BlackBerry to use their software? Is it even at a point where it's...
And here's an interesting kind of a counter to your point of view there, Alex. It's that maybe beyond the software too, what they're licensing is the BlackBerry name, you know,
Yeah.
and the namesake that it has for this market. We
Yeah.
really, again, don't know the details here, so we'll wait till Tuesday or for the further on that. But there could be a bigger thing going on here in terms of really just taking the Alcatel brand and putting BlackBerry over it, right, for one specific market. Just like for the in the UK, instead of launching the 4S, they launched the Idol 4 and let the 4S be the higher end kind of Vodafone type device, whereas it's almost the inverse here, where we have the 4S in the States and you're able to get it on Cricket and things like that, but you can't get the Idol 4. So really kind of maybe just another subplay for them to kind of be in that market in two different ways.
But so is what's good for BlackBerry right now necessarily, like I feel like the people that are listening to this podcast right now and the people that are really hardcore into BlackBerry, I feel like the path that BlackBerry's taking right now is not at all for us. Like, it may make sense for BlackBerry, but to be excited over a lot of these things, like, do you want a rebranded Alcatel Idol 4 to have the BlackBerry? Is that?
It's like what's going to make me, if I picked up a Z30, right, and an Alcatel Idol 4, and I didn't know any of the backstory behind either of the devices, right? I may lean one way. I may lean to the Idol 4, type device. I may lean toward that Hamburg, not because I, am indebted into the software experience, but just because I like the phone a little more. I honestly think that at this point, the people that are listening to this podcast are more interested to understand and learn about how BlackBerry survived themselves, how they didn't wither and die, that they actually pivoted and succeeded in continuing to go in a different path, right? I think that's really what we're chronicling here on this podcast and for these people. And obviously we're going to keep you on pulse and on beat with what we have that is coming, right? Like these devices, that are coming down the line. Even with what Crackberry does, right? A lot of what Blaze is doing is keeping BlackBerry's message clarified and kind of refined, as opposed to letting these other media outlets go out and contort that message. We have kind of Crackberry as a pillar to kind of just keep the news relative to what it actually is, stay objective on it without taking real sway. So I'm excited to see, whether this, TCL built device is it really a DTEK 50, because if it is, guys, this podcast is over. I just want to reiterate all that fact.
I think, I don't know, man. I think when it comes down to it, the biggest takeaway, I guess you could say, from the BlackBerry Security Summit was that BlackBerry is still basically going hard in the software area, but when you really look at it, John Chen had a lot of underlying messages as well. If you go through like the interviews and stuff like that he did with some of the media, not even necessarily just our Crackberry interview, because that was basically a media roundtable, but he said a lot of stuff about Android and basically adding special code on top of Android, and he even leaned towards talking about Android Nougat. Like, how does John Chen even get like this? Just as a comparison, this is the guy who basically said that like
Google,
it runs on the Google, right? So like, how does he know about Android Nougat? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's some further business going on that we don't necessarily know about behind the scenes, and he's talking about inserting special code into Android N for the priv and all this stuff. And I don't know, but more to James's point about the possibility of licensing the BlackBerry name as well, he even hinted towards that. Like, he basically said that, maybe maybe we'll just end up licensing the name. And it was just
Yeah,
kind of like
he
an
said this
offhand comment.
backhandward stuff like the whole time at the event, where like
Yeah,
he's
and
so coy about it. He's just like, whatever. Yeah, we're
yeah,
gonna commit to
and
this.
he dropped like all these little teeny tiny hints that when you look at them individually, they don't really amount to nothing. You just chalk it up to John Chen being John Chen and sort of like talking loosely, right? But when you start looking at it, it shows that there's like a little bit more happening in the background that nobody seems to know about, and he's not really forthcoming with all of that information as of yet. And I don't know, it goes back to what I was saying about in terms of their devices and stuff like that. That I'm not even necessarily sure that BlackBerry knows exactly what they're doing when it comes to devices. I think they're getting to that point, but they're not willing to go ahead and give us all the information. And I think more than anything else, that was probably the biggest takeaway from the Security Summit, other than the fact that him and Marty Beard are basically out there trying to go ahead and basically control the message of BlackBerry. Like, look at the software side, guys. Don't worry so much about the hardware. And I don't know.
One of those striking John Chen quotes was, I don't think any company's future is in its phones. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
when you have a CEO saying that, you need to understand, as Alex said, the hardware portion is not necessarily dying, but it is going to fade away. Because in the commoditized market that we're in, right, with smartphones everywhere, everybody's got them, right? They're all connected. BlackBerry going and saying, we put our blood, sweat, and tears into building you another slab. It's like, why? They're not going to invest in that. It's easier, much easier, to go to a partner who has a very solid phone already and, repurpose toward your ends. And it makes a better kind of integration between the partnership there, because you want everyone to succeed that way. It puts Alcatel behind the device and really wanting, the hardware to be as good as it is. And as well, it makes BlackBerry really push to then maybe go about some of the messaging and marketing for it, or at least in terms of because really this is John Chen really just listening to the market, right? Him and Marty both seem very focused on just kind of giving the people what they want at this point, to the best of their ability, right? BBM video is a testament to that. We've been asking for it, and they brought it about. In terms of the hardware piece, and maybe Alex, you'll speak on this, but John Chen said the priv was too expensive. He said his customers were like, yeah, I want a secure device, but I don't want to have to pay that much for it. I'd prefer to pay, $500 as opposed to $700. He's like, you know what? I'll do you one better. I'll get you in right under 400. How about that? And they're like, all right, I'll buy that. That's kind of the conversation they're having with customers. Do you really think that those customers are going to start showing up now that we're at a lower price point? If BlackBerry really does hit where they need to on a well-priced device, do you think that will finally bring people back over?
Man, I just don't know if it's going to be considered well priced, depending on I don't. It depends on so many things, because I feel like people aren't looking at the price at $400. The person that's going to buy this phone is not looking at, oh, this is a $400 phone. They're looking at it, okay, it's going to be $14.99 a month for 2 years on whatever carrier. So less than like the cost of the phone, I'm more curious what it's actually what kind of deals they're gonna have, or what's gonna come out to there, and then like how does that compare next to an iPhone, or next to, I don't know, is a OnePlus 3, you can't get that through carriers, can you? You have to get that directly through OnePlus?
Yeah.
Okay, so like
$400 for a whole lot of phone.
exactly, but the thing is, I feel like the person who's gonna buy the OnePlus is probably not the same person that's gonna buy a BlackBerry, because I think the one benefit BlackBerry has is carriers. I mean, you look at the Nexus devices too, a lot of them don't sell to the level that maybe they should, because they're not in carriers at all. And only the people that know about it are the ones that are going to buy it. But then we have the whole problem where carriers aren't pushing BlackBerry anyway, so is it really going to change anything? And
accessibility, though, you're right. That's a good point of scale. I didn't even think about that additive that they have, that they do have their carrier relationships to be something they can lay back on. And again, the subsidies and things like that may actually make it a little bit more appealing. And again, we don't know, right? We don't know who's building it. We don't know who's selling it. We don't know the price. All to be confirmed with us early next week. But some interesting stuff coming from BlackBerry. We saw BBM beta roll through. So yeah, BBM is a little bit lackluster, but even still, they're working on upgrading it, keeping the UI fresh for groups. I'm interested to see how that kind of plays out, if it's a little bit smarter of a workflow. And as well, updates for iOS and Android that we talked about last week. BB10 got theirs in beta zone this week. So really focusing on the group side on the BBM one. It's really just interesting to see kind of the development pace is so much more cross-platform nowadays than it is, keeping the native things totally up to date and spick and span. But that's part of this transition that we're going through. If you're interested in watching any of the content from the Security Summit, go to crackberry.com. There is both the session with former New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani and as well John Chen's initial keynote. All that stuff is out there. Some really good coverage that was done. I enjoyed the live blog, Blaze. I was there up and watching it. I took the day off just to relax, get my binge on with the BlackBerry stuff, and some really good coverage. And in our after show, I want to talk about the article you guys did, really summing up the event well, talking about how BlackBerry needs to kind of move the media away from their preconceived notions. It was a really nice piece. I thought it was well written.
Yeah, Daniel did a good job on that one.
Yeah, entitled "Media Conditioned to Ask BlackBerry About the Handset Business," says Chen. Really, really good piece. Definitely check out some of that stuff. We're going to wrap this up, guys. Next week, we'll have a lot more to talk about because we'll have hopefully a device to talk about as well, and we'll be able to put some of our questions about it aside and really kind of hone in on the larger messaging behind what that device has. I put out some feeders into our Patreon group, and we got some interesting comments that I wanted to bring up, most of which we've kind of danced around here already, but I thought they were pretty interesting nonetheless. So I put out these feelers, and Lee, one of our subscribers on Patreon, mentions there seems to be a fair amount of buzz around the Alcatel phones in VR. Could you comment on this? Will this help BlackBerry by being connected to Alcatel? Kind of an interesting point there, right? That this phone is selling its counterpart, is selling with a VR headset. Do you think that has any kind of way onto what BlackBerry is doing? Because I really feel like people are going to be so kind of separated between the two that it won't have any effect on BlackBerry, aside from people making the comparison.
Yeah, I don't think there's any relation happening there. I would be incredibly surprised if there was, but it just seems like that whole side of the thing just seems to be like an Alcatel Idol 4 business side of the thing that they're simply addressing. It doesn't seem as though that's going to fold into anything that BlackBerry is going to do. It would be awesome if they did, though, because then that obviously helps push some of their consumer messaging. But at the same time, I don't think that they really want to go ahead and push out much of that consumer message.
Enterprise VR, BlackBerry is cutting edge.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like
sit at your desk and do your work.
Yeah. How do you mix those items and have it still remain relevant, right? So.
What I do think is going to help in terms of this is that the Alcatel Idol 4 and 4S have reviewed well, and people have been pretty pleased with them. They've gotten between 7 and 8 out of 10. Like it's a good device. It's a good base. So I think in terms of comparison, if people say oh, how good is this device, and let's compare it to if there is any mention about the Alcatel Idol, it won't be negative, right? It will be semi-positive, which I think is beneficial, right? I think people may even be inclined to say, with the VR and all the things you can get, if you can get the Idol 4 and you really don't want the BlackBerry piece, that it's a good option as well. So it kind of helps both brands, right? It allows them to kind of focus on which user wants which type of device, as Alex mentioned a little earlier. Just like the OnePlus people are going to go for a OnePlus, the people who want a VR headset are going to go for a device that comes with one, right? Or one that they can get that works well with their device. Lee also mentions here, I asked a question about my daughter buying an iPhone last week and when we could possibly see a pop-up store in Canada for BlackBerry phones. Obviously, there are service providers like TELUS that are not really working to promote BlackBerry well in Canada. And this is something we've talked about, Lee, previously, I think on episode, let's say like 107 or 108, entitled Brookfield, where we talked a little bit more about this in the after show. So definitely go check out that after show because we went in depth about how Brookfield has a lot of veins into different industries, and doing another pop-up store would be a good idea, at least if they can see the numbers that the New York store is doing. I'd love to see them kind of continue that effort, especially with these new devices coming. It only makes sense, right? Blaze, I know you guys reported on this previously, but were they going to sell this newer device in those pop-up stores? Like, it wasn't just shop BlackBerry devices. It was going to be all the new stuff coming too as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of interesting because when when Alicia was visiting one of the shops. That was one of the things that the employees mentioned offhand. That that pop-up shop was going to be selling the next newest BlackBerry device. I mean, I don't think he was supposed to specifically say that at any given point in time. I don't want to get the poor guy fired or anything, but that was one of the things that he actually mentioned, that when the next BlackBerry device is announced, they will have it at the pop-up shop. So
At least they seem to have that piece kind of tied together, right? That they're gonna
yeah,
have some of the latest products there. I would hate that they have like a delay or anything like that in terms of getting the latest and greatest out there. Beating the carriers out and that being like the first place you can really go get that phone would be pretty cool. So interesting stuff. Another kind of comment here is, with BlackBerry's partnership with TCL, do you see them able to compete in the mid-range phone business? It seems that the main growth in cell phone business is in the $200 to $400 range. Competition is brutal, and this year there's been a lot less growth than other years, and really I think we've touched on that throughout, that it's going to be pretty tough for them to really compete. But a deal like this, if it is strictly a licensing one, may put the hardware kind of cost and margin over on one side, whereas BlackBerry is maybe just taking a recurring software revenue for the licensing and the brand name licensing, or whatever the deal entails. So who knows? We'll get a closer look at that definitely in some days to come, and we can swing back on that. Last bit, on the other hand, with the Entrust Data partnering with BlackBerry on BB10 security, do you see this as an endorsement for further growth in BB10? Where do you think its main application will be? And for that one, I'm thinking totally on the government side, in strictly regulated businesses. But I did see that too. I did see a press release that had BlackBerry 10 in it, and I'd skimmed past it, and that was the Entrust Data partnership that they do. Again, John Chen even mentioned, I think, at the Security Summit, that the BB10 security is still better than what they're able to implement on Android. And by better,
yeah.
just more under their umbrella, because they develop and control it, right, as opposed to the Android OS, which they don't. So is that a further endorsement for growth in BB10? Probably not, no. But I do think that that is an endorsement in the continued maintenance and support of BB10, especially on the security side. Maybe some innovations there, but I can't see really BB10 growth at this point. Alex, do you see a partnership for BB10 to be something that should drive growth? I mean, tell us a little bit about. I know you're an application developer, and they have this App Heroes program that they're running right now. Basically, developers get in an app native new. By the end of the month, you're going to get some extra recognition and things like that. But also, they've been kind of featuring in BlackBerry World some of their app developers. So have you participated in any of that? And what are you seeing? Can you compare growth of an app partnership on the security side to what you do as kind of a more consumer niche player in the BlackBerry world?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because they did feature my app somewhat recently, and I got to check out some of the download numbers and things like that were going on, and there were a few purchases. It's definitely died down a lot. Back when BB10 was like really big and things were kind of going like crazy, I was pretty consistently getting anywhere from like 200 to 300 downloads a day, and it was pretty consistent. And for having such a niche app, that was like surprising. But so with this whole thing where they featured me, like finally they featured me and everything, and then they sent me an email and said, hey, you've gotten a lot of good download numbers and things like that we're going to feature you again. So I'm like, whoa, let me check out the download numbers, because that got me really curious. Like, oh, so it did well. And at first it was like 120 downloads, then like 100, and then it kind of averaged out maybe around 90 or 100 a day for about 2 weeks or so. So those are definitely decent download numbers for an app that is as niche as mine is, but it's definitely like you can see that there's been a huge decline. And the fact that they even told me that it was one of the most downloaded apps that was featured, that doesn't make me feel the absolute best, because I'm like, it shouldn't be, because it's a very niche product.
It's very niche, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's not the best sign, but it's also not the worst. I could have
It's a
expected
testament to
many
how
less.
amazing web design cheat sheet is. Go check it out in BlackBerry World, and please pay for the freemium model. Pay into literally unlocking like $2.99 per section of this darn application.
Okay,
Please do it.
no. $1.99 per section, and one is 99 cents. Lay off me, bro. A lot of
I
work
stand
going into it.
happily corrected. He's discounted by $1 on one section.
I could reduce the pricing
Nah.
for the 2 sections, but then I'd have to update the app to relay that. That's too much work.
I feel like anyone who watches Upstream is like doing the exact opposite of buying your app right now.
It's fine. You guys supported me back when it mattered, so.
Yes, yes. When there was
I
only
feel
one
like
section
the
to pay
Upstream
for instead of
viewers are
four.
the ones that are buying the app.
What's up with your BBM channel, dude? Yours is worse than Cluely's right now. Like,
Mine or Alex's.
Well, everyone's, yeah.
Blaze's is like semi-updated. I mean, it's probably more updated than mine. Nah, probably not. But no, Alex's web design cheat sheet one. He had a good one. It was like a web design BBM channel. I actually got some good stuff from there. And since his app isn't on print, I can't actually enjoy his
bad
feed
enough
anymore.
when it comes to social media and just like posting things, like I'm bad enough with that. And it's the same thing. It's just like the user base is so small right now with channels that is it worth that kind of effort when I'm not even putting that amount of effort into Twitter, or which I have like many more. Well, actually, no. I have more followers. I had more followers on BBM channels than I did Twitter. But I don't know. I get like a lot of spam from people too. I had to turn off like direct messaging and things because it was really bad.
It's because they saw Upstream and they're like, make me website, man.
Yeah, I wish. That would be nice. No.
Spam is something that's still inherently terrible on BBM channels. Like,
yeah.
Is it spam or just like the user bases? Maybe that's rude.
It's spam to us, but for the user base, I guess it's like channel growth in some respects. But
I mean, I get tons of spam through my app as well, like the BB10 app, because I have an email address in there, and you can click a button to like request a site feed for me to add. And whenever it comes in, like my stomach turns a little bit. I'm like, oh, hopefully no one requested something, because then I'd have to actually update the app, and it ends up just being like just spam, just like a different language or nothing's written or just whatever. So it confuses me. Like someone physically went on their BlackBerry 10 device, clicked the button, typed in spam, and sent it. Like why? I just don't. I don't know. I don't get it.
These are the questions.
Yeah.
I'm at least excited that you're making money on BlackBerry World.
Is that making money? I'll be honest with all you guys. After being fully featured for a solid 2 weeks and all of that going on like crazy, I think for the entire month I made $8 or $9. So definitely, I was making closer to like between 50 and 100 a month back when things were going well with BlackBerry 10. So
next week on Upstream, Dark Life of a Developer. Dark developer days. Now let's hop on this after show, guys. I definitely want to dig in a little bit more on that Crackberry piece about how the media is conditioned to talk about this handset business. It has a lot of good information in it, and I think that'll be a good place for us to kind of break down the this next device that we're going to be seeing as well. As always, our Patreon subscribers keep our podcast rolling, and we have some cool stuff coming for them and for everyone really in the next couple of days, along with what BlackBerry is doing. We try to keep a tight timeline, even though we don't know what BlackBerry's is, but we have definitely some cool stuff coming through the pipe. You have any housekeeping, Blaze? Anything cool coming on Crackberry?
Well, aside from whatever happens next week, no.
Aside from next week, no.
At least I'm honest. I mean,
no contest.
We roll with whatever BlackBerry is rolling with, and if they're rolling out a new device, then I mean, you can obviously expect the best coverage on that. So stay tuned for that. It's pretty much going to be a week of whatever this whole new BlackBerry device is. So
I'm excited for the media gambit. I'm excited to see where they're going to end up on this one. But we will catch you. We're going to catch you all next week. Again, this device is really going to be launching in the next couple of days here, so we'll see you back at the end of July on the 31st. We are 3 episodes, guys, away from the end of Season 7 of Upstream, each season having 16 episodes. So we're trucking right along here.
Yeah.
Brandon couldn't be with us. He was actually just with us prior to us coming on. He's out drinking with friends, and we had to start a totally separate podcast just so we could get away from him without kicking him out. He's probably still on it right now. It's just waiting for us to.
He's over there chatting by himself.
Anyway, guys, y'all take take it easy, and we'll jump on this after show.
Yeah. Don't buy my app. Subscribe to Patreon. No, if you're going to buy my app, subscribe to Patreon instead. Like, do that. Okay? Thank you. And no, here, I don't know if anyone even cares. Sorry, this is like a last minute thing. But if you do subscribe to Patreon and you genuinely want my app, let me know and I can add you to the free download list or whatever, so you can get it for free. If any of you even are on BlackBerry 10 and genuinely care about it. So, yeah.
There you go.
Alex is just like selling his app now.
I'm giving it away for free, kinda.
So please download my app, please.
And I bet Penguin too. I'm just putting words into Brandon's mouth, but I'm assuming probably the same thing. So if
Brandon makes more than you and wasn't featured, how does that go?
Yeah, this is true.
It's
a very niche app. That's what happens. So.
Yeah, learn web design with Alex's help. He's got your back. Anyway, gentlemen, let's go hop on this one. Take it easy, y'all.